Good afternoon and welcome to the Brand Storytelling live streams for June 17th, 2020. I'm Drew Parkhill. Thanks for being with us. These streams are aired every Wednesday afternoon, and our mission is to deliver the most timely and relevant information for our community of brands and their storytelling partners. These shows are designed for you, so please let us know how we can best serve the community by suggesting future topics and guests that would help you now as well as into the future. You can drop me a line. I'm Drew at BrandStorytelling.tv. I'm excited to introduce our host, our good friend Danielle Dardashti, who founded Dash to help marketers tell more impactful stories. There's a lot I could say about Danielle, but I think I'm just going to hand it off to her and let her introduce the rest of our group. Danielle, you want to turn your video on? There she is. Oh, you're on mute.
I am off mute now. Am I off mute?
No, you're good. You're here.
Okay. All right. Thanks. For brand storytellers, it's about telling strategic stories that will at the same time delight, entertain, and inform audiences while also moving the needle for the brand. But how do you continue to do all that when you're in the middle of a worldwide health pandemic, an emotional civil rights uprising, a financial crisis, and a dramatic presidential campaign? That's certainly a lot of stuff. Welcome to my guests today, Jill Kress from PayPal, Rich Latour from BlackRock, James Namoudi from the Brand USA, and Allison Payne from Heineken USA. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for taking part in this conversation. James, first your job at Brand USA is marketing the US as a travel destination to an international audience. You've obviously needed to do some pivoting in the last few months. Explain all that has gone on and how you've handled it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the last few months, really, the COVID-19 pandemic has really challenged us more than anything we've experienced to date as an organization. Essentially, what you're seeing on the ground is a global standstill in international travel dating back to March to an extent not really seen in any of our lifetimes. So obviously, it's caused us to make a lot of significant changes to our approach to how we market in a lot of our international markets. The biggest change that we have done is we basically paused all traditional global paid media and advertising that has a more immediate call to action in terms of traveling to the United States. And made the shift towards more branded entertainment programs and platforms that tend to be a little bit more of long lead, inspirational in nature. The big thing we don't want to do, and the reason for the reallocation is we didn't want to go dark. I mean, I think all of us as marketers know the importance of continuing to engage with our audiences rather than reacting. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing that in a way that was both sensitive to the situation on the ground with the virus and kind of this idea of stay home, stay safe. At the same time, being cognizant of the way user behavior was changing under this lockdown model. This is something that is new not only to our customers, but for us all as marketers. And one of the biggest trends that we were seeing was there was a rapid increase in the amount of entertainment and media that people were consuming at home. Obviously, it's something that we all expected. We're all watching more Netflix and more Amazon, but it also provided an opportunity for us to really lean into some of those branded entertainment programs that we had been building for a couple of years now. One of the case studies we looked at when trying to figure out what is the best way to pivot and communicate was Disney Plus, which launched in November of last year. They had a 5-year target of hitting between 60 and 70 million subscribers by 2024. They had hit that number by March. So there was definitely a great opportunity for us to leverage that as a means to reach our audience and continue to engage. So what we did is we shifted resources to our branded entertainment platforms that we started building for several years. For those of you on the line that were at Brand Storytelling, I'm sure you watched some of our IMAX films that we did with McGilvey Freeman Films. We started those 3 years ago with this idea of the move from linear to streaming and the rising growth of that area for us as marketers. Off of the success of that, we wanted to build out platforms that allow us to tell the story even more wide, where was the idea came for us to build our own OTT and streaming channel called USA TV. We've been building that for about 1.5 years now, but over the last 3 months, we've really shifted resources and really honed in and began to focus on creating program and content for that platform. And it's been fantastic. I mean, we've launched a couple of original content programs and entertainment programs ranging from 10-minute episodic to 30-minute and 1-hour program blocks. And it's really allowed us to communicate in a way that's sensitive to the situation on the ground in terms of the virus and people consuming more content, and still allows us to continue to engage with our consumers in a way that's matches the situation.
Yeah, I'm sure you could never have imagined such an interruption and disruption in business for all of your partners as well, the airlines, the hotels. I mean, it's just...
It's across the board. I mean, you look at domestically, to your point, the airlines and destinations, but even abroad with some of our international stakeholders, they've seen their business come to a screeching halt. So part of what we're planning now is how do we engage audience during the current crisis, but when things do settle down, how do we kind of lead the charge in terms of recovery and kind of turning everything back on?
Thank you, James. And Jill, for you, for PayPal, it's been kind of the opposite extreme. Business is booming for online purchases, lots of new customers every day, hard to keep up and create content that is paying it forward, I guess. I didn't even mean that pun, but also being of service to the audience that you're serving. So many new customers every day. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges with that and how you're servicing the audience through your storytelling.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. Add to that I'm new to PayPal. I just hit I think it's been 6 months. And I landed back here in the US March 4th after a 3-week tour of meeting my team over there. Which was great. I'm glad I did that at the time. So one of the reasons that I wanted to join PayPal was because of its mission-driven orientation. This version of PayPal, which is 5 years young or 5 years old, is a spin-off from eBay. And Dan Schulman, who is our CEO, founded PayPal as it is today based on the mission of fostering financial inclusion and really ensuring that PayPal existed to democratize financial services. And it's been, it was something that, having spent the good majority of my life and career at MasterCard, I had been following PayPal and saw this commitment playing out in some of the decisions that they made. So it's been really interesting to be at PayPal through the times of what's playing out now, both related to COVID and what's happening in really the conversations around social justice, and seeing that PayPal has very much led through these times with their values and doing the right thing in what we decided to do in supporting small businesses and facilitating lending through support of PPP, the decisions we made to waive fees, the work that we did to waive fees for consumers through the government stimulus relief package in the US, and a really amazing and inspiring commitment that we made last week to invest $550 million, just over $500 million, to invest in really continuing to foster economic development for Black and minority-owned businesses. So we did a $10 million grant last week to help businesses who were impacted through protests in the short term, working with nonprofits that facilitate Black-owned businesses, and creating a long-term fund that will invest in long-term prosperity by investing in Black-owned, minority-owned, and businesses and entrepreneurs. So there's so much good happening. we feel like incredibly responsible to do good in this moment. I guess, you know, at the same time, consumers are coming to PayPal because we're serving a real need for them. So, you know, we've got all these shoppers who are new to e-commerce. You know, we've got our kind of silver tech segment who is coming to PayPal in droves, who are embracing e-commerce in ways that they haven't done so in the past. We've got people who need our platform to get money to other people, whether it's, you know, so our peer-to-peer network of enabling payments, helping people on the front line. We've got Venmo under the you know, as a PayPal company as well. And you know, so we started to see all these great trends in people using the platform to do good and to help other people out. So we started an effort on Venmo called Venmo It Forward, where we just started surprising and delighting people within their Venmo feed, where we saw people giving money to just help others out, whether it was someone who was, you know, the barista that they missed, someone that was working on the front line in a grocery store. And we started to see the emojis change from things like beer and pizza to hearts and prayers. And so we started looking at the conversation that was playing out with our community and giving $20 Venmo It Forward gifts to people who are doing good on the platform. And what was really inspiring was that, you know, we saw that almost everyone who received a Venmo It Forward decided to then Venmo It Forward again and do more good. And Ellen ended up picking it up and doing a $100,000 worth of Venmo It Forward. So really using the platform in an organic way and doing something similar across PayPal with a PayPal It Forward campaign, where we were, you know, recognizing and investing in kind of COVID heroes and people who were doing the right thing. And this is all played out through telling those stories, telling the stories of how our community, our two-sided network of merchants, which means so much to us and small businesses, as well as consumers, are using the platform. And what's been really inspiring, and then I'll take a breath, is to look at like what's played out in the notes across PayPal, where people are sending money to each other, to see the innovation, how we've embraced new norms. So we just launched a brand film in Europe, and we feature one of the little nuggets that we saw. There was lots of payments that were referenced as dough for dough. So people paying people who are making bread. You know, we also saw sort of the movement around, you know, sourdough starters, but, you know, people deciding to do good and sell bread from their home, and people people embracing that. And also, you know, being able to celebrate the stories of things that I think we can all relate to, buying scissors or dog grooming shears or hair dye or nail polish to try and maintain some semblance of taking care of ourselves and our pets while we were at home. So it's just been really interesting to see how the platform has really been there for people, how they've used it, and how our community of small businesses and consumers are really embracing innovation and new norms and continuing to support each other where they can.
And something you just said about leveraging, it sounded like you were saying that you're leveraging that data that you're getting from the notes that people are writing on Venmo and things to inform the storytelling that you're actually doing. Is that what you said? That's
yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah, we're able to leverage that data in a non-personalized way to sort of look at the aggregate of, like, you know, the payments that are playing out and feature those stories. So, you know, seeing, you know, the SKU level data, what are people buying online? You know, so big, you know, we saw big jumps in those very things that I talked about, you know, dog shears and shears for hair and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. Rich, so people are looking for help right now around what to do with their money. And your team at BlackRock has been impressively cranking out great stuff, even with all the constraints right now, and even in a highly regulated industry. How have you done it?
Yeah, and I would just add that it's been done against the backdrop of the fact that we're actually new to this at BlackRock. So I've been there for a little over a year, and really brought on to help build an in-house content production function to share the thought leadership and the great content that's already being created in many pockets around the firm, and sort of reimagine it for digital and social first audiences. So it took a few months to get that capability up and running, and the timing actually was fortuitous because we were set to go just as, unfortunately, as COVID hit. So we expected to not be able to crank too much stuff out, especially at the beginning. We just assumed, but then when market volatility was in full swing, we realized this is sort of from BlackRock perspective and the insights that exist around the firm. This is exactly the type of content that could be helpful to people around. So that manifested itself in this new video series we had started, and as well as our podcast called The Bid. And we actually surprised ourselves with the working from home in a highly regulated place, what that meant for editors working from home and sending drives in and that sort of thing. But we were able to work it out. And I think we've been unexpectedly prolific. Again, and I'm talking from a corporate sort of brand level in terms of sharing our insights on markets and the economy in the time of market volatility that was caused by COVID. So, there are other marketing teams within BlackRock more on the product marketing side. iShares, our ETF business, they had to sort of pivot their more traditional marketing plans that was about a product pretty quickly toward market volatility, which they did. But our team, as I said, we sort of surprised ourselves with the ability to crank stuff out in this remote atmosphere. And I actually think it probably took something like this to sort of prove that we could do it, as in like the little engine that could.
Yeah, I also love your new brand ambassador program and the way that you've kind of worked that out as a workaround to be able to lend your individual voices to the voice of the brand. How you've managed to do that on social, it's so smart. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the content team at BlackRock, so my team runs social for the firm, and this had started even well before I'd started with discussions internally with we know that the best ambassadors for many companies are the employees who work there, and if they take pride in the place they work, and if they believe in the company's purpose, they could unleash how proud they are to their networks, and there can obviously be an exponential effect. So obviously, if you work in financial services or in pharmaceutical companies, they are both heavily regulated industries, down to the level of, some places just forbid any activity on social media to begin with. And that in the 21st century, well, it's not very 21st century friendly these days. So instead of waiting for the regulators to change in terms of what constitutes marketing, we were able to leverage this tool, dynamic signal,
okay.
which sorry.
You
sorry.
froze
I don't know
up
what
a
you
little
missed.
bit. Yeah.
Hopefully. Okay. So we've leveraged this tool, dynamic signal, which many companies use as a way to get employees to be able to share content on social in a compliant manner in line with the record keeping that is required. But just because we can do something doesn't mean we do. And there had to be sort of an internal socialization of this. And so we were part of that effort. And again, this program got off the ground in December with a pilot of 25. I think we had ambitions to grow to 100 by the end of this year. But then again, when market conditions worsened and there was sort of, we had this big announcement around sustainability earlier this year, which is a huge theme for us around making sustainability our standard in investing on behalf of our clients. We wanted to get that word out, and we wanted to leverage our employees' voices to get that word out. And then when COVID hit, we were also able to leverage the brand ambassador program to get the word out about the various ways we were helping organizations get through the crisis. And then that all culminated just a few weeks ago where we had, Larry Fink, our CEO, wrote this note to employees that we very deliberately put on into the system so people could share it about the racial injustice situation in the United States, which was obviously the you know, such a well-crafted letter. We wanted the world to see it. And what we realized is it really meant a lot to the employees to be seeing the CEO write something like this and then be able to share it with their networks. We were able to get some exceptions in this case to, you know, have it shared a little more widely. And these are all just great steps as we look to tell our story more publicly.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful, really bringing out that personal story of the individuals involved with the brand. Thank you, Rich. Allie, so your group at Heineken, the Mexican beer brands we all love, you have been dealing with a whole other set of issues because the Mexican breweries were shut down for a while and those communities were hard hit financially. Talk a little bit about how that impacted your ability to tell stories and the kinds of stories that you were telling as a result of it.
Yeah, so hi everybody. I cover the Mexican beer portfolio for Heineken USA, which is Dos Equis and Tecate. And I don't know if many of you are aware, but we sort of hit a crisis and in the fact that we actually had to supply declared beer brewing as non-essential and shut down all the Mexican breweries. So it didn't only affect us, it affected competitors like Modelo, Corona. So if you do have any Mexican beers in your fridge, they may be the last few in the US right now. The good news is they've opened up, but we have out of stocks all over the country. So the reality was that we had to literally adjust our supply chain. So I spent a lot of time, like you can't market beer unless you have beer, right? So we pivoted. There was an announcement today that we are actually bringing in supply from Holland, which is our parent company, obviously Heineken. So we joke that we have Dutch Equis and Ducati coming into into the country. And so depending on which state you're in, you may see it. And that was the necessity. Our call was it's better to have beer than no beer. So that's what we did. And so that, like a lot of my marketing time has been occupied by supply sourcing. But on the other side, we're looking at the opportunities to, you know, effectively what we're calling a recovery plan. Like the, you know, we're in a consumer packaged goods business. It's not like toilet paper and wipes and disinfectant where it's flying off the shelves. We rely on the on-premise, so we rely on pubs and bars that have been decimated by this. And therefore, how do we recover and help them recover? And how do we also bring back to our communities and our consumers? So Tecate is, our positioning is around being unapologetically Mexican-American. And that community have been one of the most affected through unemployment as a result of you know, the back of house of restaurants being shut down. Obviously, they're an incredible frontline working force. So we've done a lot of collaborations, in particular in Los Angeles, where the brand is extremely strong in terms of linking with charitable networks that can that are providing effectively food and supplies to frontline workers. And trying to bring back and support the on-premise. So as these businesses come online, they need our support. They're not going to bounce back immediately. So how do we provide them with PPE equipment, disposable menus, to-go cups, et cetera, So that's the sort of pivoting that we've been doing as an organization to understand how we support that side of the business and our consumer. And we've also been very cognizant of, and I think James mentioned about that going dark, like we came off all media March, April, which was the right thing to do because you don't want to, hey, drink beer message in the middle of when people are feeling, you know, it's all about personal safety and reassurance. It was just not the right time for our category to be talking. We are now looking at coming back and how we come back and what messages we come back with. we actually pulled a Dos Equis campaign. It was probably ahead of its time. It was called Interesting Beer for Interesting Times. And it was filmed back in, November last year. And when we looked at it, we just felt like it was not the right thing to launch now. We may bring it back in September, October. And then we're also looking at how as a beer brand, we play in this new reality. Like if you think about beer brands, they sponsor an enormous number of outdoor and sporting events. So we have had the US, the US Open, which Heineken sponsors, declare that it's going to be played to empty stadiums. Major League Soccer is coming back to empty stadiums. Dos Equis sponsor college football. College football is still slated to play, but we don't know how they're going to play. So a lot of our marketing activities are pivoting on scenario planning around what happens if there is no audience, and therefore, like live audience. Therefore, how do we make the experience as good at home as it would be in a stadium? I think it's going to be hard, but that's the sort of things we're working through with our agency partners, because we could be in this for the longer term in terms of shutdown of major events. Coachella, which Heineken sponsors, was pushed from April to October and now canceled till next year. So how do we engage with consumers in the online world like we would do in the offline world? And they are all the dynamics we're dealing with.
And is it my imagination, or has beer been slow to e-commerce?
Oh, yes. Beer has been slow to e-commerce because of the 3-tier system. So for those on the line, yeah, I have to explain it. It was after a supplier can't go direct to a consumer. So there's no way in the world that Heineken can ship a consumer beer direct. We have to go to a distributor. Distributor goes to a retailer sells to consumer. So that has been the structure, the legal structure, and very different regulations vary across states. So as a result, the whole category has been slow to e-commerce. But with the opening of Instacart, for example, it's opened up a system by which people can get beer delivered at home. And so I am on an e-com task force at Heineken. All of a sudden, we're like, we have got to get our act together. And we're working fast and furious to make sure that all our content is shoppable. I think we've just been lagging behind the rest of the, the other categories that have seen such a big shift, like tourism, etc., where the majority is purchased online. But what we've noticed is in the month of April, household penetration of e-commerce of groceries went up by 10%. And household penetration, that's an amazing shift, right? So it went from 34 to 44% of US households shopped for groceries online. Groceries have been the laggard, right? And we believe that the new normal will be that more people will just, if you've got your beer delivered once to home, you'll get your beer delivered again. When this pandemic passes, that will be the new normal, and therefore we need to be on top of that.
Yeah, no, it seems like a good time for it.
Yes.
All four of you are experts at brand storytelling, and I'd love to hear from your perspectives what other companies are doing a good job at navigating their audiences right now and figuring out what those audiences need. I know a few of you also wanted to mention the brands or categories that stand out as being impressively tone deaf right now. So you can go either way, the best or the worst. Rich, do you want to go first on this one? You can do best or worst or both. Oh, you're on mute, Rich.
So, I think the story we told in the pre-interview, which you liked, was we were watching the concert, on that Saturday night with all the artists where, the Rolling Stones played, and it was, this benefit. And I think Taylor Swift organized it. And so we were watching with our kids, and I'm not going to identify the brand because I think they're all doing it, but a car commercial came on in the middle of COVID. And I was sort of not saying anything watching it, and it got to the end and it revealed it was for this brand and its car and this time. And my 6-year-old yelled at me and said, "That's for a car? Like, who would be buying a car right now? That doesn't make any sense." And he literally said that. And I was like, huh, pretty smart kid. I've done well.
Yeah, I love that. And your computer also like made a noise right as you were starting to say it. It sounded like you were bleeping yourself out. You were saying like that your 6-year-old had like some expletive right then with the, yeah. But I love that. Yeah, but I love that he called them out for.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty impressive for someone that age to even be able to tell that from a tone perspective. There might, in this time of crisis, where there's a lot of anxiety and like we're not in a place that he was able to pick up on. This doesn't seem right.
Yeah, totally. Allie, how about you? Have there been some companies that have impressed you or kind of impressed you in one way or the other?
Yes, I mean, I share Rich's, point of view on some things. It's like, maybe a little tone deaf on what people needed at times. Like the whole country, well, it depends on which state you were in, by the way, as to what curve you were on in terms of this crisis, right? So I was based in New York, and when you're watching, the hospital ship come down the East River or whatever, you're pretty in crisis mode, right? Other states were in very different situations, but to watch an ad about buying a car, etc. But I actually thought Domino's did a great job, which was, people needed food, they needed it delivered. They talked about contactless, pizzas, like we put it in the box without even touching it. And it was true to what they are. They deliver pizzas, and they were just telling you, we're going to deliver pizzas in a way that is completely safe for you, and they involved their franchisees. I just thought it was an incredibly nice pivot to recognize what was going on and sell their brand versus be tone deaf in this whole thing around, hey, like, hey, 44 million unemployed, but hey, buy a car, I did see some things like Norwegian Cruise Lines advertising like in early March, but I think it was probably stock that they'd already bought and the upfront. And I was like, who is getting on a cruise right now? But it was just the reality of the things that people were, I guess, tied to. I did feel like at a certain point in time, I'm talking early April, the vanilla of advertising started to come, which was, we're living in unprecedented times, close up on frontline workers with, masks on. I mean, all stock photography. And I just felt that people decided to, me in particular, just decided to shut down. And someone said, did you notice any marketing in the month of April? And my answer was, I didn't notice any. Like, it was just a sea of sameness and a wallpaper of brands that were just trying to do what they can, I guess trying to utilize their media buy. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, James, when you and I spoke about this last week and I asked you this question, I really liked your answer about what some of the platforms and the media companies have been able to do and how quickly we've seen them evolve.
Yeah, and I think let's talk a little bit even further about what we're talking about. I mean, the big one that we discussed was ESPN. Obviously, Allison mentioned the complete disruption to sports during the spring. State Farm, they're highly leveraged against sports and basketball in particular. So obviously you have the NCAA tournament as well as the NBA suspending their season. And they pivoted to more branded content as well. So they were one of the major sponsors of the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. So how they did their activation against that, they created commercial spots, but they did it in a way as if the spots were filmed during the 97-98 season. So you'd see like a Sports Center ad, and you'd think you're still watching the documentary, but it turns out to be a State Farm commercial. So they're talking about what is happening at the time, and then all of a sudden they pivot to talking about, oh yeah, in the year 2020, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And the whole time the audience has no idea what is going on. They're like, wait a second, like, is this actually a Sports Center piece from 20 years ago? So that one went over really well. It was a great pivot, and then also sparked a conversation online. There was a lot of narrative around the documentary and the State Farm spot in particular. So they were able to still engage with sports despite the disruption of not actually having live sports available. And then the other side is how the platforms reacted. I talked a bit earlier about how television and broadcast viewership was skyrocketing, but we were also seeing the same thing in social. So Facebook really invested in kind of expanding their family of apps to be able to get users to engage with parts of the platform that previously were kind of niche, depending on who you are. Also things like Instagram lives and concerts and Instagram live workouts. So we're doing a lot of that. To Allison's point about kind of those rallying videos of kind of, we need to unite to defeat the pandemic. Obviously Facebook has a massive audience. But where they did the right thing, they were one of the first brands to do it. So they did it in March when it was still very new. And because they owned the platform, they were then able to push it out to a lot of the audiences. And I think by the time April came along and a lot of other brands started replicating it, at that point, Allison, to your point, it started seeming more like wallpaper, like another brand is doing it. And it came off as a little bit inauthentic. And then the last one was TikTok. I mean, TikTok is one that we've all been watching for about 6 months. That platform skews very young. So you're talking teenagers, people in their early 20s. But I think one thing they've seen once people have gone on lockdown, you're finding more and more millennials are getting curious and saying, what is going on TikTok? So I think they've been able to engage people during this time. I'll be interested to see what happens in terms of their average age of active users. I actually think they've been able to move the dot on that a little bit higher. So coming out of the pandemic, they can then leverage kind of that new audience and in a higher age range to be able to not only grow the platform itself, but from an advertiser base, I think advertisers will be a bit more willing to engage with them in terms of reaching their audience. So.
Jill, how about you? What has stood out to you?
I think building on some of the things that others shared, what I was really impressed with was the pace of pivot of a few companies, right? To really, be able to, to be nimble and pivot. So, I think Verizon did a great job right out of the gate with their effort to support small businesses through their Pay It Forward campaign. And they started with, live streaming concerts and gaming events twice a week. We actually collaborated with them to help get the payments out to small businesses who were in need. So I liked it because it happened really quick, right out of the gates, outside of as COVID hit, and a way to actually, they were one of the first to bring community together through music. So I love that they did it fast and with purpose. YouTube, I think, also pivoted really nicely with their With Me campaign and really putting their creators to work to share ways to create with them so that people could find things to do while they stayed home. So everything from, tie-dye to cooking, and the way they created content around that was really great. And then, as per usual, Burger King, I think seized the moment with their QR ad that they did. Again, really providing value to themselves and to the audience through, you just saw the QR code was just floating around on screen, was, ultimately a way to drive increased app downloads for them. But then, the consumer got a free Whopper, and it drove traffic for them. And, they were out, pretty quickly with that. So, I think given the real-time world that we all live in and aspire to tell stories in, like those quick pivots and nimble brands who were really nimble were the ones that I was gravitating towards.
And Jill, there was a question in the chat for you, but it sounds like Bob thinks you may have already pretty much answered it. Did you see the question in the chat?
I did, and I responded back to the chat. Hi, Bob.
Okay.
So,
yeah, you want to just address his question a little bit?
Yeah,
He said with online shopping and payment methods like PayPal and Square growing their consumer bases quickly, how does an electronic payment brand build a brand connection with people that will never visit a bank and view a payment platform like the PayPal brand as a payment platform primarily with a personal connection?
Yeah, so, as I shared earlier, we feel incredibly fortunate to be a brand that has been needed by consumers at this moment on a On pre-COVID, we have about 100,000 net new active customers that come to PayPal. During COVID, that's been over 200,000. So, you've got consumers who are coming to PayPal with intent, and we felt like it was a moment to celebrate those consumers and what the platform was doing, the network was doing to really enable them. So it was really around leaning into those human stories, both of generosity, of goodness, the PayPal it forward, and then just celebrating the fun things, that are playing out in some of the content that we're launching now, celebrating things like moms coming together to hire a magician or someone to do crafts, and using a money pool to sort of get the money together so that you could, entertain your kids with, a magician who, you pitched in to have like entertain your kids over Zoom or something like that. So telling those stories through some of the branded content that was targeted to moms and parents who are home trying to keep kids busy, but through the lens of how other people in their situation were solving some of those challenges that they had.
My parents had never shopped online until COVID. So if you need a story about someone who's an avid online shopper now, just in the last couple months, I got the candidates for you.
Love it. And yeah, building on Allie's point, what's been really interesting is to see the resilience of consumers. In Italy, there wasn't much of an online shopping market for things like coffee and wine because people knew where to get it where they lived, and lots of e-commerce playing out for coffee and wine. So I think, a sense of consumers are not going to not have what they want. They're going to find new ways to get it. So your parents have it.
Absolutely. I mean, none of us could have expected any of this, and where we are now is so different from where we could have imagined, which brings me to my last question for all of you. If you could travel back in time to March 1st and tell yourself something, either a quick story or give yourself some advice, what would it be? Allie?
I would say that I would never say again, it can't get any crazier. We never would have thought that like Mexico would shut down the breweries. We never would have thought that, this would go on for so long, and we may anticipate a year, so we've been scenario planning on our scenario plans. And so nothing, it can get crazier is what I'm saying. So to my team, and trying to keep motivation through this time when we're all on Zoom calls, is how do we flexibly be really flexible and need to pivot constantly, because things are going to be thrown our way that we never expected. And we've got to expect the unexpected through this, through these times, for sure.
Rich, what would you tell yourself?
The team can do it, is what I would tell myself. So again, against the context of from the corporate brand perspective at BlackRock, we were very much in the beginning stages of being able to churn out content at scale, or at least the level that we're doing now. So if you told me on March 1st that this was right around the corner, I probably would have said, oh yeah, so we'll go home and we'll come back and try again in June. And that was not the case. So really the team could do it. Trust the system is what I would say.
James, how about you?
Yeah, mine mirrors a lot of what Allison said. I mean, I think going into this, when we went on lockdown, I mean, the expectation was like 2-3 weeks. I know, Danielle, we were talking, you were supposed to come to DC like within 2 or 3 weeks after.
Oh yeah, I was supposed to meet with you. I think it was like March 11th or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So we're like, all right, 2 weeks, then we'll be back. But here we are 4 or 5 months later. So I think once we go back, the one thing I'd say is, it's just the beginning. This is going to be an extended situation, and we're going to be into the summer months and still be in that position. But I do think early on we did put a lot of stuff in place that allowed us to pivot. So I think just reassuring that we are heading in the right direction and we do have the right plans in place would be good to tell in March.
And real quick, Jill,
I would tell February Jill Crest, who loves to shop and loves to be on trend, buy way less high heels and invest in gym shoes.
That's a good one. Well, thank you to all of you for joining this call today. This was a great conversation, and I really hope to see all of you in person soon, maybe at Sundance. Fingers crossed. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe.
Until then, stay safe.
Thank you.
And keep telling great stories.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much. This recording will be on
Thank you.
YouTube tomorrow, so feel free to check us out, BrandStorytelling.tv/streams to stay up to date. Thanks, Danielle, for hosting. Thank you, Allie and Rich and James and Jill. Talk to you soon.
Bye.